welcome to Brand with Podcast. I am your host, Ivan Estrada. In this podcast, we will be discussing all things branding and marketing, from fashion to design, real estate, entertainment, tech, philanthropy, and much more. Nothing is off the table. We will have guests from all over the world to give you a global perspective on branding and marketing. Our goal is to dissect as many branding and marketing experts to get you all thinking about your brand by providing motivation and inspiration for you. Thank you all for listening, and let's roll. Hello and welcome back to Brand with Podcast. I am your host, Ivan Estrada. Today we have a very, very special guest. She was part of the first and only all-female rock band to ever have a #1 album, Beauty and the Beat. She achieved success in the music industry over multiple decades as a part of the Goo Goos, as well as a solo artist topping the charts with Heaven is a Place on Earth. She also put the new wave rocker genre on the map and is so legendary that her music continues to be a staple and has outlasted multiple pop culture and trend cycles. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the one, the only, Mrs. Belinda Carlisle.
I love that intro.
Ooh, that was good. That was great. Cool. That's you, Belinda. That is all you. And there was so much about you, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to throw in just a little teaser for everyone, and then I'll let Belinda open up from there. So how are you? How is everything?
Well, I mean, we live in Thailand, and they've done a really great job with the virus. So we've been pretty normal now for over a year, and they're doing the vaccine rollout. So we've been really good during this. It's, you wouldn't know anything was up unless you noticed everybody wearing a mask, but masks are very much part of the Asian culture. So it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. And I feel like it's going to be part of our culture here in the States too, because from what I've heard is even after everyone gets their vaccine, a lot of people are deciding to keep their mask for a couple of months or even years after, just as a precaution.
I want to throw away my mask. I hate it so much.
I can't wait. I'm going to celebrate and go dance in the street and just throw my mask. Well, I'm not going to litter, but I'll probably put it in a really cute little bag and then just throw it away and throw it down in the trash can.
Yeah, I'm kind of done with it. I'm really done with it. I mean, I think it's, here they do it, out of respect for other people, but I really don't like wearing it.
Yeah, same here. Well, hopefully I see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
And so I'm super excited about that.
Yay.
So first and foremost, again, thank you so much. It's so amazing to have you. And, this is all branding and marketing. And we'll start with that as our first question. So how would you define your brand, Belinda Carlisle?
Gosh, something? I didn't really understand brands before. And actually into the last 5 years, I never really thought about it. I just know that in the past 5 years, there's choices that I make to protect it. My brand would be more sort of adult, but then again, the demographic is so wide. So there are things that I do and won't do. And, I used to take everything that came my way. Now, protecting my brand, there are certain shows I won't do, certain kinds of, certain things I won't do as far as my career goes. But I never really thought about what exactly my brand actually is, but I know that it's a valuable asset. And I know the Goo Goos brand is slightly different from my brand. So being mindful of how precious of an asset that it is. So, but I can't really sit here and describe what my brand is because I don't really know. It's not something that I really thought about. I just know that I have to make good choices.
You mentioned the difference between the Goo Goos and Belinda Carlisle as a brand. So what are some of those differences?
Well, I think that my brand is probably more adult contemporary. The Goo Goos brand the Goo Goos have been around for 40 years. So it's a very punk pop brand, has more of an edge probably than my own brand. But while I say that, both brands are very true to who I am. So like I always say, I may not look like a punk rocker, but I am. I have a punk rock heart. I was born contrary. So the brands are different, but they're very much me, and the Goo Goos, I would say everybody's very, very protective of our asset that we have that's so unusual and so valuable.
Tell me about you and the Goo Goos. Like, how did that all come about? How did you guys meet? Because we talk about in branding, the importance of collaboration and working together and finding those people that you connect with. Like, how did that all come together for you girls?
We just met on a curb. Well, we knew each other. We were kids. We were like 18 years old. We were sitting on a curb drinking beer at a party. And all the other kids were in bands. And there was like 50 kids in the LA punk scene. That was like 1978. Most of the bands were horrible. So we thought, well, we can be in a band and be horrible too. That's almost cooler than being musically proficient. That's how we started. So it was kind of, we just learned as we went along, about the business and learned how to play our instruments as we went along because nobody had any kind of idea how to do anything. But, in retrospect, you're right. It's like important if you're working with other people that you get along, that you have the same vision, that, same taste. As far as that goes, in the very beginning, we were really, really lucky. That's why I think that part of it is kind of destiny that we met each other and that we're like 42 years later, we're still working together. There's something there that's not just people thrown together. We had the same sort of vision as to what the Goo Goos were, the kind of music we wanted to play, the kind of places we wanted to play. There was some personality differences in the very beginning, but once those were kind of weeded out, we were all on board with the same goals, the same taste, the same everything. And it was just lucky that we got along. And it's a family. It's not really friendships, although we love each other as family, but you can also, there's that familial tension too. But we're really, really lucky in that way that we were able to just have the same vision from the very beginning. There's luck and timing, but there's also destiny. And it's just weird how we were 5 kids who, were very immature at the time, but we had the same vision, the same sort of goals. We liked each other. We had the same taste in music, and against all odds succeeded because we really, I don't know if the Goo Goos could happen now. There's not a whole lot of authenticity. And that's one thing that when I look back, it's like, wow, there was so much authenticity and we really held true to our beliefs and our sort of vision of what we wanted to be.
So elaborate on authenticity, because we talk a lot about that at our show. And I think it's so important, especially nowadays. We're being hit on by media about what you should look like, what you need to sound like, what you need to put out there. And you talk about authenticity. Like, tell me a little bit more about that, because that's so important.
Yeah, it's really important. It's important to, I don't know. I mean, I came from, my career started in the late 70s when it was all about authenticity. It's probably sort of changing a little bit in the early 90s. Record companies or companies that actually nurtured the artists and helped them find themselves creatively. At the end of the day, it's all business, but there was a value put on authenticity that I don't want to diss any other artists, but I think authenticity these days is really few and far between, and it's just gotten to a point where it's about money. It's about, budgets. Music's been sexualized quite a bit, which I remember the Goo Goos being at the Billboard Awards a couple of years ago and sitting in front. And we're no prudes. And just watching, it was like just a sex machine, like one act after another. And even the girls were so sexualized. And that's not very authentic to go that direction. So, I have really strong opinions about authenticity, globalization, having an identity, not being a sheeple. I mean, I have really strong opinions about that. I think that's because I was born contrary. Yeah. I mean, I put a high value on it, and when I see it and when I feel it or when I hear it, I'm like completely blown away because there's not a lot of it these days.
And so you talked about the challenges that women face, especially, you were talking about the Billboard Awards and how it's being sexualized. What do you think the challenges have been with the Goo Goos in the 80s and the 90s and now? What do you think has changed? Like, what do you think the pressures are that women are facing nowadays that's allowing for this authenticity to just drip away?
I think because the music industry is run by people who don't love music. And they know nothing about music. And I think it's sort of the obvious way to go and to sexualize not just music, but everything. That's kind of a boring way to go. I mean, that's the obvious. And I just think sex sells and it's a really bad combination. And I think our challenges back then in the early days of the Go Go's were that there had never been anything like us before. That was a success. You had the Runaways, you had Fanny, but they were only successful on a cult level. As far as mainstream success, there never was anything like us, and no one would take a chance on us. I think that's probably gotten better, but I think it's gone to a direction where everything is so visual now. And like I said, sex sells. So, you get these young girls that you can mold and that can be told what to do. That seems to be kind of the direction that the big corporations that are record companies, that's our go-to place, I guess.
And what advice would you give to young women out there who want to get into the music industry? What piece of advice could you give them of encouragement or of, like we talked about, authenticity to be able to get on that stage with merit alone and not having to use sex to sell?
I mean, our situation, I don't know if the Go Go's would happen, could happen today because the way that music's changed, but I would just say is to really be true to yourself and to not sell out to the sort of obvious way that a music corporation wants to go. But I don't know if that's possible. I mean, I think in some rare cases it is. You have your Adeles. I think, Gaga, who I think is totally authentic. But I mean, and I don't have my finger on the pulse either. So there probably is quite a few out there of women who don't resort to sex. But I just think it's a cheap way to go. And even back then, I would never do that. That's just not me. I could never. Of course, I've had suggestions made after I left the Go Go's, like, you should sing songs like, show your tits. And I'm not going to say what they told me to do, but I was kind of mortified when you could be a much bigger star if you used, if you played the sex card a lot more. And it's like, no, I can't do that. That's just not me.
Yeah. You were being true to your brand.
Yeah.
You were being true to your brand.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's amazing. Let's change gears now and talk about spirituality because, for me, that's been huge, especially lately. So tell me about that path for you. Like, how has that helped you to become the woman that you are today?
Well, I mean, I grew up Southern Baptist and I was like, even from a young age, I did not drink the Kool-Aid. I just didn't. But I always felt there was something bigger than myself. And when I turned 40, I was dropped by my record company for a lot of different reasons. But I thought, well, I know that I'm not defined by what I do, but I got to find out who I am. So I started digging deep, started reading all these books on finding yourself. And there was a book called The Buddha in Your Mirror. And it's a book about chanting, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. And Soka Gakkai was this organization that this book sort of talked about, and it supports Nichiren Buddhists around the world for chanting. And I'm not a part of it anymore, but it got me started. And I realized the power of chanting. A few years later, when I got sober, I knew I needed all the extra help I could get. So I got very much into Kundalini yoga, which is my daily practice today, which includes breath work, yoga, chanting. I'm big on chanting. And I know the power because when I first got sober, I was chanting 2 to 3 hours a day. And there was no way that I would have been able to power through it like I had without chanting. With yoga and with chanting, it really, doing a lot of that, it really changes your perspective on things. So now I have a very, very solid foundation that I live my life from. And, I have a daily practice that I, once in a great while, I won't have time to do it, but I make time for every day because I know how important it is. And I think that this last year has done a lot of reading and there's some great teachers out there. And I mean, now I never would have thought when 40 years ago that I'd have a spiritual foundation to live my life from.
And I kind of want to open up about my sobriety. So I, for a very long time, I dealt with addiction, alcohol and substances. Like you, as a kid, I recorded an album. I was in the music world. And, I've told my family and friends that if things would have worked out for me, I think I would have been dead by now. I don't think I was ready to handle all that stress and all that pressure as a 15-year-old boy who was already touring and just not knowing exactly who I was. And for me, at age 36, I talk about it in my book, Brand with Purpose, the importance of how sobriety changed my life, how meditation and looking inward. I also do yoga. I was able to really get to know myself again. And I've, for me, the importance and how it's changed my life and my perspective and how I view myself and how I view the world has changed dramatically. And I'm so glad that you opened about that, because it's so important, especially in this world, during COVID, the amount of people that I saw that were drinking and using and on social media and making kind of fun with it. I just thought, wow, this is becoming a huge problem.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. I thank God I have something that I can, that got me through this. And, I start my day, a cup of coffee and 20 minutes of a great teacher like Eckhart Tolle or Ram Dass. There's a lot of great teachers out there. So that, and then go straight into chanting and meditation and yoga. And yeah, it's very important to be able to, and it's a great thing to be able to witness yourself and to be able to be sort of the watcher from above. And I've kind of gotten good with that. So I don't know. I just can't imagine life any other way. And I would have been dead for sure. There's no question that, or in prison, but probably dead.
Yeah. And so for someone who is friends of mine, family have always asked me, like, how do you find a purpose? Like, how I don't know what I'm supposed to do on this planet. I have no clue. How are you able to find your purpose? What led you there? Was it mentors? Was it something spiritual? Like, how are you able to find that?
I was really, really lucky. I didn't really know what I wanted to be in school. The only thing I wanted to do was travel around the world. That's the only ambition I had. I decided that being in a band was the best way to see the world. I wanted to be a travel agent when I was a kid, but being in a band would be more fun to do that. I think just because I loved music so much, that was a dream for me. And then just lucky that it came along at a time when there was so much creativity, and then there was a huge music scene going on. So without that music scene, I always had interest in the arts and design. And there are a lot of things that I probably could have done, but I was so young when the Goo Goos started. I was 18 and I didn't really have time and gave it much thought about what I wanted to do in life. I kind of just fell into it. I was really lucky. Most people, I don't think are that lucky, where they don't really know what they want to do with their life. And the other thing, I think, I've always been very black and white, and I kind of have a very good sense of what I want to do. And I've always had that from when I was a kid. I must be somewhat driven if I'm still around and, 42 years later. But I was really lucky. I was really, really lucky. Yeah.
And so let's talk about the vegan life. So how did you fall into that?
Well, I am vegan-ish. Yes. So I'm vegan most days. And then I'll have maybe a piece of cheese or whatever, which is really amazing to be able to do here in Thailand. But I've been vegetarian for the most part of the last 35 years. I started off with meatless Mondays when I got back on the vegetarian vegan bandwagon. And then it got really easy to do. And then I heard something that Moby said, the musician Moby. I was just listening to an interview with him, and he was talking about being a progressive and having these friends that are so-called progressives, but then tuck into a hamburger. And it's like, well, that's like the number one cause of greenhouse gases. And I thought that makes so much sense to me. And, I've always been an active member, an animal advocate for PETA, I don't know, since 1986, I think. So that kind of made sense. So I kept cutting back the dairy product. I can't even remember the last time I drank milk. My weakness is Parmesan, but we can't get good Parmesan here. But once in a while, if my body feels like I need an egg, I'll have an egg. And I don't really have a moral sort of problem with that if it's cage free and if it's organic. So I'm so happy that I'm not supporting the dairy industry or the meat industry, factory farming.
I have here one of the charities, Animal People Alliance. So how did that all come about?
Well, it's Animal People Alliance. I love India. And of course, I've been an animal activist since, for 30 odd years. I have a lot of friends that work in NGOs in Calcutta, and they come here for the weekend to Bangkok, to have fun. One of my co-founders, it works in human trafficking. And he said, I want to do an animal project in Calcutta. I thought that's what I want to do. And after thinking about it for 6 months, I approached him. So we formed Animal People Alliance in 2014. Our mission is that we treat the street animals of Calcutta, but also provide employment to women who have been trafficked or anyone who is at risk at falling below the poverty line. So we've been really, really successful. We've treated close to 20,000 animals. We've expanded into northern Thailand, and we have presence up there for spaying and neutering and rabies drives. We work with WVS, which is the World Veterinary Service. And it's just expanding and growing. And it's my little baby. I'm only 2-hour flight from Calcutta. I go back and forth quite a bit when it's open, but I haven't been back for the past year. But the team are great. And they're really making a huge difference in a city that really needs animal services.
What's next for Belinda Carlisle? Any fun things happening in 2021 or 2022?
I have so much work that I hope, I had lots of work from last year that got moved to this year. So, I had the Goo Goos, we had the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame possibility coming up in a couple months.
It's huge.
So that's amazing if that happens. I just have dates, I do all this weird sort of extreme travel, which I did the Silk Road year before last, and working on a trip to Pakistan for next year. I don't know. I mean, that's fun for me, is being able to travel. It's just we've been caged in. It's a good cage. It's a big cage, but it's still a cage. And, I'm looking forward to getting to the States and seeing my family and my son and people I haven't seen in almost a year and a half.
That's awesome. And speaking of Duke, who is such an amazing human being and an LGBT activist among all the things that he does, good friend of mine who obviously has an amazing mother. And let me ask you one thing. So what's that one thing that you want Duke to remember you for?
Oh gosh, I'd say, a loving mother, and I like to think I was a nurturing mother, but also that had integrity. And I think integrity has always been really, really important to me. Really important.
A huge part of your brand, integrity.
Yeah, it is. It's important to me.
And last question, what advice would you give your younger self?
That you were always perfect the way you were. I mean, I spent years and years from even the early days and being in the public eye and never really feeling good enough or deserving, never felt pretty enough, never felt talented enough. And now I look back at those pictures now and go, oh my God, I was so cute. What was I thinking? I was like so awesome, to be able to pull off for other people what we pulled off. So I was just say I was perfect no matter what I was going through,
It's a beautiful message. Yeah, I think all of us, especially in this world that we're living in now with social media and so many pressures around us to, just relax, people. Relax, calm down, enjoy life. I personally, why wasn't this good enough? I should have done this, or I looked weird there, or so many pressures. And I create all these boundaries for myself that I think that in this world, really keeps us from living to our fullest and being, as we talked about, our most authentic, which right now, I think that's a huge issue. Like, how can we be as authentic as possible in this world where we're surrounded by, we're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not tall enough, you're not rich enough, you're not this enough, and that enough, right? So
right.
That's such an important message. And Belinda, anything else that you want to, leave us with? Any message, any golden nugget to our listeners out there who are huge fans of yours and that you want to, just leave us with today? I don't know. I think the big thing that I learned from this year is the importance of family and friends, really. I always appreciated it, but I kind of took it for granted. And now that I'm just on the other side of the world with no way to really see anybody, I just, I can't wait to get out there and give everybody a hug. Oh, I can't wait for that, right? And
yeah.
So it's down the road, guys. I can feel it. I can feel it.
Yeah.
It's at the end of the tunnel. Well, thank you all for listening to Brand With Podcast. To keep up with Belinda, follow her on her Instagram at travels_with_miss_Mason. And thanks for branding with us. Again, Belinda, thank you so much for being with us today. You're a legend. I mean, what else can I say?
Thank you, Ivan. So nice to meet you.
Thank you all again for listening to this episode. For more information on branding and marketing, check out our ecosystem on brandwith.com. You can also find more tips by signing up for our newsletter that's not boring or by following us on social media. If you're looking to get featured on this podcast to discuss your branding or marketing needs, find out how to do so on our website as well. Can't wait for you to brand with us again.